In the tech world, some of the most desired careers to break into is becoming a FANG software engineer, a machine learning engineer, or become a startup tech founder. All of them have pretty defined career paths, and in this video, I will give you a guide for each one of these careers. Today's content will be broken down into 4 pieces. Number 1, what you do in the field. Number 2, hours and lifestyle. Number 3, the compensation you can expect to get in each of these careers. And number 4, how to break in and how to choose the right field. So currently, as a software engineer, some of the key responsibilities you have is software development, system design, problem solving, collaboration, and the often dreaded on-call duties. I think many newcomers think that software engineering is just coding all day, but that's far from the truth. Especially at larger companies, coding is about improving, simplifying, and enhancing systems. This process often involves team discussion to find the best solutions. We create design docs, then have team reviews, and then collaborate to find the optimal solution before coding. Once the coding is done, there's also validation testing, runbooks, and business success metrics to evaluate the solution before it goes live, and even after it goes live to make sure everything is working. I spend a lot of time talking to new grads and computer science students for my career coaching, which I have linked below, but a lot of times they think that pretty much my entire job is spent coding and trying to figure out how to get my software to work. On the contrary, I would say the majority of my time, over 50%, is actually spent on design and reaching consensus on the optimal solution being used. Coding is in fact the easy part because once you've done all of the planning, you just have to figure out and implement in the way that you've actually already decided with your entire team. At big companies, everything is simple, efficient, well documented, and tracked with metrics. This actually makes the coding incredibly easier compared to a lot of the coding assignments that you have to do at school. Machine learning engineers do a similar job with a few key differences. A machine learning engineer primarily focuses on developing and training machine learning models, while a software engineer focuses on software development in general. This includes model development, data preparation, feature engineering, algorithm selection, and evaluation of the model. This is of course in stark contrast with startup founders. Now previously I did work in some small startups. I'm also taking a course right now at Georgia Tech about entrepreneurship, and essentially there's no qualification you need to be a startup founder. However, there are simple steps that typically most startups take. Usually what happens is somebody has a product idea and they start working on the minimal viable product. And typically founders at this point focus on something called the lean canvas model. It allows you to break down your idea into sections for a one-page business model. This model allows you to really key in on what your unique value proposition is, which is what makes your idea different from other people, and secondly, really help you come up with your unfair advantage, which is what you have that distinguishes your product from other products currently out there in the market. I knew this founder in Toronto who now is part of this billion-dollar startup, and they followed this book called Running Lean by Ash Moria to figure out what their business model would be. This lean canvas model is pretty much an essential item that most tech co-founders try and figure out before going into and starting their company. Now, once you figure out your minimal viable product and you do have some user validation, there is not a really set rule for funding, except for the general idea of the stages. Pre-seed stages, which is when you first just have an idea and you need sort of funding to get that idea started. Seed stage, which is when you do have some user validation and you have some initial growth in terms of your users. And then following, there are Series A, Series B, Series C funding to help you continue to grow your company. Okay, now that you know what each role does at the start, here is a sense of what the hours and lifestyle is like. So typically, the hours at a FANG company can vary significantly, so it's really hard to give a rough estimate, and it also really depends on the team and company that you're with. My experience as a FANG software engineer, we typically do work normal 9 to 5 hours, with 3 days at the office and 2 days at home. The times where things get a little bit crazy comes in a couple of ways. The first is if you're working on your code and your test just continues to fail and you can't figure out the reasons why it fails, and you just spend pretty much the entire night trying to figure out what in the world is going on with your testing or why your code is not particularly working. I think most software engineers have gotten that experience where they're just completely stuck on their code and they just have no idea what is going on, and it takes a significant amount of time. Another is when you have a design doc due, yet you can't figure out a way to get the right data, or you can't figure out the best optimum solution that you think people will agree on, or perhaps the people on your team don't agree on the right solution. That can be extremely difficult because you're trying to get a design ready for implementation. You really have to figure out a way to present it so that you can drive consensus within the team. Finally, the one that I think people talk the most about and people seem to dread the most before entering as a software engineer, which is your on-call. On-call, in my opinion, is talked about the most and people worry about it the most, but I actually think it's more predictable and easier than the other two that I listed just above. People ask me so much about how many Sev2 tickets do I get per week during on-call, which is essentially tickets that get paged to you right away that you have to treat, doesn't matter what time of the day it is. And my answer to that is that yes, you might get a lot of Sev2 tickets depending on the team that you're in, and it's an immediate problem that you need to solve. However, a lot of these problems are quite predictable. If you're in sort of a mature team that has already developed their on-call rotation and resources for quite a long time, there's usually a lot of runbooks, guidelines on how to solve these Sev2s. So I actually think it's quite a lot easier compared to the other two problems because of the lack of ambiguity. In terms of on-call, you're also not doing it all the time, maybe once every 2 to 3 months, depending on how big your team is. Now, for machine learning engineers, it is very similar, except in my opinion, one key difference. Yes, they need to understand the problem, fix their models, write up design docs, similar to what software engineers do as well. But the one key difference as a master's student doing machine learning courses, as well as asking machine learning engineers who I know, is data wrangling. So for those of you who don't know what data wrangling is, basically it's getting your data to work. Data wrangling is basically everything that has to do with your data before you input it into your model, which includes checking to make sure the data quality is good, removing all the duplicates, fixing missing data points, checking for compatibility, transforming the data, splitting the data, making sure that everything works. I have to say, a lot of the machine learning assignments that I do and a lot of the data wrangling I had to do back when I was analyzing genetic data sets as a genetic researcher was not very fun. The reason being is that you could just make one tiny mistake and that could mess up your whole model and it could get your model not to run. And sometimes for things that take a long time to run, you're not sure if it will run correctly for quite a few hours. So that can be extremely frustrating. Something to know about both of these careers is, generally speaking, when you are in a more junior position, you do more of the coding and do more of the hands-on work. But as you become more senior, you're involved with more projects and you're more focused on the design and direction of those projects. And a lot of the misnomers is that once you become a software engineer, most of your days are going to be spending coding on your own. But for the most part, in my experience, it's actually been a very collaborative experience, and coding is actually one of the sort of easiest parts of the job. Now, while the hours are pretty normal for machine learning engineers and software engineers, for tech co-founders, it is completely different. You're pretty much on call every single day, always thinking about your business. In the beginning, you have to start working on everything, choosing a name, incorporating, doing everything to get your business started. Then later on, you might get to a stage where you need to get funding and network to sustain your business once you have user validation. And then finally, once you do have a mature company, you probably need to focus on hiring, delegating, and figuring out systems to get everyone working on the same vision. Moving on to compensation. In Levels FYI, it goes through every single one of the FANG companies and what the pay scale is for each of those companies. Typically, they involve 3 components: your base pay, your stock, as well as the bonus that you get. As a machine learning engineer, the pay bands are similar. However, I've read recently that for a lot of those PhDs who work on specific machine learning models that OpenAI or some of the big companies are looking for now, they're actually willing to pay machine learning engineers a huge amount of money. Now, if you join as an early stage employee to a startup company, you can probably mitigate some of the risk by taking a base salary with maybe potential stock options later down the line. But if you're just a founder who is just starting from the beginning, you're pretty much getting paid nothing at the start. Not only this leads me to how to break in and how to choose the right career for you. So again, I think the main thing to consider here is the amount of risk that you're willing to take. So for software engineers, it is very standard in which a lot of interns who go into particular FANG companies, they might get return offers. FANG companies also hire new grads who have just recently graduated, and they also do new hires from referrals for engineering with prior work experience. Most of the time, the typical path for students is essentially they first get started in computer science, then they work on a couple of projects, then they get their first internship at a non-FANG company before finally getting an internship at a FANG company and getting their return offer. For machine learning engineers, it's very similar. A lot of people take internship routes, and once they have the return offer that they want, they will return to that particular company. However, something I want to add is that I do see that for machine learning engineers, the level of education that is required is much higher. A lot of times they're asking to look for master's and PhD graduates who have really excelled and have a lot of research papers for the machine learning models that they are going to be working in. I've also seen that a lot of data scientists or software engineers have transitioned to machine learning engineers. And that's because for data scientists, they do a lot of data wrangling, data modeling as well. And typically for software engineers from data science, the job is not so different from machine learning engineers. So I've seen people make that transition as well. For a startup founder, you can pretty much get started at any point, but a lot of times there is usually a technical co-founder who has a lot of tech experience. So you might join as an early stage engineer. You can start yourself with a very specific skill, whether it is the ability to get funding or a specific tech skill that will help you with your tech startup. And a lot of times, most people want to go to a specific accelerator to work with their co-founders, with the most popular being Y Combinator. So going back to how to choose, I think it really depends on the level of risk and what you're really passionate about. If you have a specific idea and you really want to execute it, then I would say go for it. Go and try and become a startup founder. A lot of the roles in software engineering and machine learning, they have more set paths in terms of how to get there. One thing I do need to mention is that software development, it scales linearly, meaning that the more software engineers you have, the more that you can do. But for machine learning engineers, that's not the case. They have a lot less roles because they don't actually need that many people to figure out their AI model. For example, I did make a video in the past about how it only took 13 engineers to make Sora AI, which is the new video creation AI that OpenAI is working on. There was an X-Scale co-founder and current VC Lucy that gives this one useful tip that I think is quite helpful. For early career advice, you can try an intern or work for 6 to 12 months at a big company, can be private, then join a Series B startup, email VCs asking for top portfolio companies, they might have insider knowledge, repeat number 2, or start your own company. And the reason why getting into a big name company could be super important for those who want to eventually become a co-founder is because it's the difference between them reaching out to you or you reaching out to them. When you don't have experience, you're probably reaching out to other people. But when you have that sort of name brand recognition, then a lot of people will be reaching out to you. Hopefully this was helpful. If you would like to chat with me more about career development in any of these roles, feel free to schedule a call with me linked below.